The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as families gathered on the pristine parade grounds. Today marked the graduation of Class 347, one of the most grueling SEAL training programs in recent memory. Out of 180 hopeful candidates who had started the journey months ago, only 23 remained standing. Sarah Martinez adjusted her navy blue dress and checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the small American flag she had brought to wave for her son. At 52, she had weathered many storms in her life, but nothing compared to the anxiety of these past months, wondering if Marcus would make it through the infamous Hell Week and the countless challenges that followed. She had driven 12 hours from Phoenix, stopping only for gas and coffee, determined not to miss this moment. Marcus had specifically requested that she attend, and after everything they had been through together, she would move mountains to be here. The other families around her buzzed with excitement, sharing stories of their sons and daughters who had conquered one of the military's most demanding programs. Commander James Richardson stood at attention near the podium, his chest heavy with ribbons and his eyes scanning the crowd of proud families. At 45, he had overseen dozens of these ceremonies, but each one still filled him with immense pride. These young men and women had pushed themselves beyond what most people thought humanly possible. The ceremony began with the national anthem, voices joining together in a chorus that seemed to make the very air vibrate with patriotism. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she spotted Marcus in the formation. He looked different somehow, stronger and more confident than the young man who had left home. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more defined, and there was something in his posture that spoke of newfound inner strength. As Commander Richardson began calling names, each new SEAL stepped forward to receive their trident pin, the coveted symbol that would mark them as part of an elite brotherhood. The crowd cheered for each graduate, but Sarah found herself holding her breath, waiting for Marcus's name to be called. When it finally came, her heart nearly burst with pride. Marcus stepped forward with perfect military bearing, his eyes focused straight ahead. But as he approached the commander, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Commander Richardson's expression changed suddenly, his professional composure faltering for just a moment as his gaze seemed to fix on something behind Marcus. The commander's eyes had found Sarah in the crowd, specifically focusing on her left forearm where her long sleeves had shifted slightly, revealing the edge of a faded tattoo. What should have been a moment of pure celebration suddenly felt charged with an inexplicable tension. Sarah quickly pulled her sleeve down, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't quite understand. She had been so careful to keep her arms covered, as she always did at formal events. The tattoo was old from a different time in her life, and she preferred to keep that part of her past private. Marcus received his trident pin with honor, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred. Commander Richardson had seen something that clearly affected him, though she couldn't imagine what connection a Navy commander could possibly have to her past. As the ceremony continued, Sarah found herself stealing glances at the commander, who seemed to be struggling to maintain his focus on the proceedings. His hands appeared less steady, and there was a distant look in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The other families continued their celebrations, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that had developed. Children waved flags, spouses wiped away proud tears, and parents snapped countless photos of their newly minted Navy SEALs. But Sarah's attention was divided between her overwhelming pride in Marcus and a growing uneasiness about the commander's reaction. She racked her brain trying to remember if she had ever met him before, but his face didn't seem familiar. Yet something about his response suggested that her tattoo had triggered a memory or recognition that went far deeper than casual observation. As the final names were called and the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, Sarah noticed that Commander Richardson kept glancing in her direction. It wasn't the casual look of someone admiring the families in attendance, but rather the intense gaze of someone trying to piece together a puzzle that had unexpectedly presented itself. The weight of his attention made her increasingly uncomfortable, and she began to wonder if attending the ceremony had been a mistake. She had worked so hard to build a stable, respectable life for herself and Marcus, and the last thing she wanted was for her past to somehow overshadow his incredible achievement. Marcus had earned this moment through pure determination and sacrifice. He had pushed through physical and mental challenges that would have broken most people, and he deserved to have his graduation be perfect. Whatever had caught the commander's attention, Sarah hoped it wouldn't somehow diminish the honor her son had worked so hard to achieve. As the ceremony neared its end, she made a mental note to congratulate Marcus quickly and then make a graceful exit. The last thing she wanted was to create any kind of scene or awkward situation that might reflect poorly on her son's military career. But deep down, she had a sinking feeling that leaving quietly might not be an option. Something about Commander Richardson's expression suggested that this unexpected moment of recognition was far from over, and that the past she had worked so hard to keep buried might be about to resurface in the most public and potentially devastating way possible. The ceremony concluded with thunderous applause, and families began rushing forward to embrace their newly graduated SEALs. Sarah watched as Marcus broke formation and headed in her direction, his face beaming with the kind of joy she hadn't seen since he was a child. She pushed aside her worries about the commander and focused on this precious moment with her son. Marcus swept her into a bear hug that lifted her feet off the ground, and for a few seconds all her concerns melted away. This was her boy, her pride and joy, who had overcome every obstacle life had thrown at him to achieve something truly extraordinary. "Mom, I can't believe you made it," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means everything to me." Sarah held him tight, breathing in the moment and trying to memorize every detail. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world, mijo. I'm so proud of you." As they pulled apart, she noticed other families gathering around them, wanting to meet the mother of their son's teammate. Marcus had apparently made quite an impression during training, and several parents wanted to express their appreciation for his leadership and character. Sarah found herself in the middle of a warm circle of military families, all sharing stories and expressing mutual pride in their children's achievements. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to relax and enjoy the celebration, accepting congratulations and praise for raising such an exceptional young man. But her sense of ease was shattered when she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Commander Richardson approaching their group, his expression serious but not unkind. The other families seemed to sense the gravity of his approach and gradually stepped back, giving them space. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Congratulations on your son's achievement. Marcus has shown exceptional character and dedication throughout his training." "Thank you, Commander," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He's worked incredibly hard for this." Marcus stood a little straighter in the presence of his commanding officer, clearly proud to introduce his mother. "Sir, this is my mom, Sarah Martinez. She raised me on her own and always pushed me to be my best." Commander Richardson's eyes briefly flicked to Sarah's covered forearm before returning to her face. "Mrs. Martinez, I wonder if I might have a word with you privately. There's something I'd like to discuss." The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she couldn't refuse without creating a scene. Marcus looked confused, glancing between his mother and his commander, clearly uncertain about what was happening. "Of course, Commander," Sarah managed to say. "Marcus, why don't you go celebrate with your teammates? I'll catch up with you in a few minutes." Marcus hesitated, his protective instincts clearly activated by the unusual situation. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, son. Go enjoy your day." She squeezed his arm reassuringly, though her own anxiety was mounting with each passing second. Commander Richardson led her to a quieter area near the edge of the parade grounds, away from the celebrating crowds. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had someone from her past contacted the military? Was there some kind of security issue with Marcus's clearance? When they stopped walking, the commander turned to face her, his expression a mixture of uncertainty and something that looked almost like hope. "Mrs. Martinez, I apologize for the unusual nature of this conversation, but I noticed something during the ceremony that I can't ignore." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to cover her forearm. "I'm not sure what you mean, Commander." "The tattoo on your arm," he said gently. "I caught a glimpse of it when you were waving to Marcus. I believe I recognized the design." Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. She had gotten that tattoo 26 years ago, in what felt like another lifetime. It was a small rose with a specific pattern of thorns, something she had chosen on impulse during a particularly difficult period of her youth. "I got that a long time ago," she said carefully. "I'm not sure why it would be of interest to anyone." Commander Richardson's expression softened, and for the first time since approaching her, he looked less like a military officer and more like a man grappling with powerful emotions. "Mrs. Martinez, I think there might be more to discuss than you realize. That tattoo, the timing, your age, and the fact that your son is here today. It's all making me wonder about something that happened many years ago. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had built her entire adult life on carefully maintained boundaries and selective sharing of her history. Whatever the commander thought he knew, she wasn't prepared to have this conversation. Especially not here, especially not today. Commander, I'm not comfortable discussing personal matters, particularly from my past. Today should be about Marcus and his achievement. I understand your reluctance, he said, his voice growing gentler. But Mrs. Martinez, I think you might be someone I've been trying to find for over 25 years. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at him, searching his face for clues, trying to understand what he could possibly mean. His features seemed vaguely familiar now that she was really looking, but she couldn't place him in any specific memory. I think you might be mistaken, Commander, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but would you be willing to answer just one question? Were you ever in San Diego in the summer of 1999? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. That summer had changed the course of her entire life, though not in ways she had expected at the time. It was the summer she had made choices that still haunted her. The summer that had ultimately led to her becoming a mother. She looked back toward the celebration, where Marcus was laughing with his new teammates, completely unaware that his mother's carefully constructed world might be about to crumble. Whatever the commander thought he knew, whatever connection he believed existed between them, Sarah realized that her options for avoiding this conversation were rapidly disappearing. Sarah stared at Commander Richardson, her mind reeling from his question about San Diego in 1999. That summer felt like a lifetime ago, yet the memories came flooding back with startling clarity. She had been 26, working as a waitress in a beachside restaurant, trying to figure out her life after dropping out of college. I was in San Diego that summer, she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not sure why that would matter to you. The commander's composure finally cracked, and she could see genuine emotion breaking through his professional facade. My name is James Richardson, but back then, everyone called me Jimmy. I was a young Marine corporal on leave, spending my last few weeks of freedom before deploying to Kosovo. Sarah's knees nearly buckled as the pieces began falling into place. Jimmy, the sweet, earnest young Marine who had swept her off her feet during what was supposed to be just a casual summer romance. The one who had promised to write, to come back, to build something real with her after his deployment. Jimmy, she breathed, studying his face with new eyes. The boyish features had matured into the strong jaw and weathered skin of a career military officer. But now she could see the young man she had known hiding beneath the surface. You remember, he said, relief evident in his voice. I wasn't sure if you would after all these years. The memories crashed over her in waves. Long walks on the beach, stolen kisses in her tiny apartment, promises whispered in the dark about a future they would build together. And then the sudden deployment orders that came 2 weeks earlier than expected, the hurried goodbye at the airport, and the silence that followed. You never wrote, Sarah said, old hurt creeping into her voice despite the years that had passed. You promised you would write, but I never heard from you again. James's face fell, and she could see genuine pain in his expression. I did write, Sarah. I wrote dozens of letters. I sent them to your apartment, to the restaurant where you worked, even to your friend Maria's place. When I came back from deployment, I went looking for you, but you had moved. No forwarding address, no way to find you. Sarah's heart clenched as she realized what had happened. Her landlord had been collecting her mail while she was dealing with her pregnancy, and she had assumed that Jimmy's silence meant he had forgotten about her. When she finally moved to Phoenix to start fresh with baby Marcus, she had never thought to check for any letters that might have been held up. I moved away that fall, she said softly. I had to. There were circumstances. Something in her tone made James study her face more carefully. Circumstances. Sarah glanced back toward Marcus, who was still celebrating with his teammates, completely oblivious to the earth-shattering conversation happening just a few hundred yards away. The truth felt too big, too overwhelming to voice after keeping it secret for so long. Sarah, James said gently, following her gaze. How old is Marcus? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Sarah had known this moment might come someday, had rehearsed various versions of this conversation in her head, but she had never imagined it would happen like this at her son's military graduation, with the father he had never known standing in full dress uniform. "He's 25, she said finally. James did the math quickly, his eyes widening as the implications became clear. "Sarah, is he—" "I need to sit down," Sarah said abruptly, feeling lightheaded as the weight of the moment hit her. James quickly guided her to a nearby bench, his hand gentle on her elbow. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the celebration continue in the distance. Sarah could see Marcus scanning the crowd, probably looking for her. She waved to let him know she was okay, though she felt anything but. "I tried to find you when I learned I was pregnant," she said finally. "But the Marine said you were deployed and couldn't give me any information about when you might return or how to reach you. I had no family support, no money, and I was scared." James sat perfectly still, absorbing this information. "You were pregnant with my son, and I never knew. I made the best decisions I could at the time," Sarah continued, defensive now. "I moved to Phoenix, got a job, finished my degree at night school. I raised him to be a good man, to work hard and serve others. I think I did a pretty good job." "You did an incredible job," James said, his voice filled with awe as he watched Marcus laughing with his teammates. "Look at him, Sarah. He's everything a father could hope for." Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over. "He doesn't know about you. I told him his father was a Marine who died in combat. I thought it would be easier than explaining that his father just disappeared from our lives." The pain in James's eyes was unmistakable. "I never disappeared by choice, Sarah. If I had known, I would have come back immediately. I would have married you, helped raise him, been there for both of you. But you didn't know," Sarah said, the reality of their situation becoming clearer with each passing moment. "And now Marcus is grown, successful, and proud of the story I told him about his heroic father. How do we possibly explain this to him?" James watched his son, whom he was meeting for the first time as a young man rather than a baby. The son he had unknowingly trained as a commanding officer. The son who had no idea that his graduation day would bring together the parents who had loved each other briefly, but deeply 26 years ago. "I don't know," James admitted. "But Sarah, he deserves to know the truth. And I need to know my son." Sarah looked at the man she had once loved, now wearing the uniform of someone who had dedicated his life to serving his country, just as their son had chosen to do. The parallels were unmistakable, and she wondered if Marcus had somehow inherited more from his father than just his physical features. "This is going to change everything," she said quietly. "Maybe," James agreed. "But maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing." Marcus had noticed his mother's extended absence and was making his way toward them across the parade grounds. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest as she watched her son approach, completely unaware that he was about to meet the father he thought was dead. "He's coming over here," Sarah whispered urgently to James. "I'm not ready for this conversation." James straightened instinctively, his military bearing returning as he prepared to face the son he had never known existed. "We don't have to tell him everything today," he said quietly. "But Sarah, I can't pretend I don't know who he is now." Marcus reached them with a concerned expression on his face. "Mom, you've been gone a while. Everything okay?" His eyes moved between his mother and his commanding officer, clearly sensing the tension in their body language. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Sarah managed, though her voice sounded strained even to her own ears. "Commander Richardson was just congratulating me on what a fine young man you've become." Marcus smiled proudly. "The commander has been an incredible mentor during training. Honestly, sir, I don't think I would have made it through without your guidance." James felt his chest tighten with emotion as he looked at the young man before him. Marcus had his eyes, the same deep brown that James remembered seeing in the mirror as a young Marine. But he had Sarah's smile and her determined chin, creating a perfect blend of both parents. "Your mother should be very proud," James said carefully. "She clearly did an exceptional job raising you." "She's the strongest person I know," Marcus replied, glancing at Sarah with obvious affection. "She worked 2 jobs to put herself through college while raising me alone. My dad died in combat when I was a baby, so it was just the 2 of us for most of my life." The words hit James like a physical blow, but he managed to keep his expression neutral. Sarah's eyes pleaded with him silently, begging him not to reveal the truth in this moment, in this place. Your father must have been a remarkable man to have earned such a wonderful family, James said, the words feeling like sand in his mouth. I like to think I'm following in his footsteps by serving in the military, Marcus continued. Mom always told me he was brave and dedicated to protecting others. That's part of what drove me to want to become a SEAL. Sarah felt tears threatening again as she listened to Marcus talk about the heroic father she had invented to fill the void left by James's absence. The fictional Marine had become such a real presence in their lives that sometimes she almost believed the story herself. I should let you two enjoy the rest of your celebration, James said, recognizing that this conversation needed to happen in private, not in the middle of a military base with hundreds of people around. Mrs. Martinez, I hope we'll have the opportunity to speak again soon. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Perhaps we will, Commander. As James walked away, Marcus watched him go with obvious respect. He's a good man, he said to his mother. Tough as nails during training, but fair. He pushed all of us to be better than we thought we could be. Sarah watched James's retreating figure, her mind spinning with the implications of what had just happened. Her son respected and admired the man who was his father, had been trained by him without either of them knowing the truth. The irony was almost too much to bear. Mom, are you sure you're okay? Marcus asked, studying her face with concern. You look a little pale. I'm fine, just overwhelmed with pride, Sarah lied, forcing a smile. This has been such an emotional day, seeing you achieve your dream. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth, drawing comfort from his presence while grappling with the knowledge that their relationship was about to become infinitely more complicated. Over the next few hours, Sarah went through the motions of celebration, meeting Marcus's teammates and their families, attending the informal reception and taking countless photos. But her mind kept returning to James and the impossible situation they now found themselves in. As the day wore on, she caught glimpses of him across various events, always maintaining his professional demeanor, but occasionally catching her eye with a look that conveyed the magnitude of what they had discovered. She could see him watching Marcus, too, studying his mannerisms and expressions with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every detail. That evening, as Sarah and Marcus had dinner at a nearby restaurant, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. We need to talk. Can we meet tomorrow before you leave town? James. Sarah stared at the message, knowing that responding would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. But she also knew that ignoring it wasn't an option. James had a right to know his son, and Marcus had a right to know the truth about his father. Who's texting you? Marcus asked, noticing her distraction. Just someone from work, she lied, slipping the phone back into her purse. Nothing important. But as they continued their dinner, Sarah realized that everything was about to become very important indeed. The comfortable life she had built on half-truths and protective lies was about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. Marcus deserved honesty. James deserved the chance to know his son, and she deserved the opportunity to finally stop carrying the weight of this secret alone. Tomorrow, she would have to find the courage to start unraveling 25 years of carefully maintained fiction and help both the men she loved most in the world navigate the truth of who they really were to each other. The celebration continued around them, but Sarah felt as though she was watching it from a great distance, already mentally preparing for the difficult conversations that lay ahead. The next morning, Sarah sat in a small coffee shop near the naval base, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. She had barely slept the night before, her mind churning with memories and fears about the conversation she was about to have. James arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, still carrying himself with military precision even in civilian clothes. He looked as tired as she felt, suggesting that he had also spent a sleepless night grappling with the magnitude of their situation. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said as he sat down across from her, his voice formal but kind. "I'm not sure I had much choice," Sarah replied. "This situation isn't going away just because we ignore it." They sat in silence for a moment, both struggling with where to begin a conversation that would reshape everything they thought they knew about their lives. "I keep thinking about all the moments I missed," James said finally. "His first steps, his first day of school, teaching him to ride a bike. All the things a father should be there for." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, and she meant it. I really did try to find you. I spent months calling the Marines, but they said you were deployed to a classified location and couldn't give me any information. I believe you, James assured her. The military was different back then. Security protocols made it almost impossible for civilians to reach deployed personnel, especially in sensitive operations. Sarah studied his face, seeing new lines that spoke of years of responsibility and difficult decisions. What happened to you? After Kosovo, I mean. How did you end up here? I stayed in the Marines for 10 years, then transferred to the Navy and worked my way up through special operations. I never married, never had children that I knew of. He paused, the weight of those last words hanging between them. I always wondered what might have been different if I had been able to find you. I married when Marcus was 5, Sarah offered. A good man named David Martinez who adopted Marcus and gave him his name. David died in a car accident 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss, James said sincerely. Marcus spoke about his stepfather with real affection yesterday. Sarah nodded, grateful that David's memory was being honored in this conversation. He was a wonderful father to Marcus. Patient, kind, always there when we needed him. Marcus never felt like he was missing anything because David filled that role so completely. And now, James asked, how do you think he'll react when he learns the truth? Sarah had been dreading this question all night. I honestly don't know. Marcus has such a strong sense of honor and integrity. Learning that I've been lying to him about something so fundamental might be devastating. James leaned forward, his expression earnest. Sarah, you weren't lying. You were protecting him with the information you had at the time. You thought I was gone forever, possibly dead. Creating a heroic story about his father wasn't deception. It was love. But now he'll know that his real father was alive all along. That he could have had a relationship with you if I had just tried harder to find you. Or he'll understand that sometimes life creates impossible situations that even the best people can't solve perfectly, James countered. Look at what you accomplished, Sarah. You raised an incredible young man who embodies everything good about service and sacrifice. That didn't happen by accident. Sarah felt some of the guilt she had been carrying begin to lift slightly. I keep thinking about how this will change his relationship with me. We've always been so close, and I'm terrified that this revelation will create distance between us. It might initially, James admitted, but Marcus loves you deeply, anyone can see that. He'll need time to process everything, but I believe he'll ultimately understand that you did what you thought was best. They spent the next hour sharing stories about Marcus, James eager to learn everything he could about his son's childhood, and Sarah gradually realizing that talking about their shared connection to Marcus felt healing rather than threatening. He was such a determined little boy, Sarah said, smiling at the memory. When he decided he wanted to learn to swim, he practiced holding his breath in the bathtub until I was worried he would drown himself. David finally took him to the local pool for lessons. That sounds like the Marcus I trained, James laughed. Once he set his mind on something during SEAL training, nothing could deter him. His instructors said he was the most focused candidate they had seen in years. As they talked, Sarah began to see glimpses of Marcus in James's expressions and mannerisms. The way he unconsciously straightened his shoulders when discussing serious topics, the slight tilt of his head when he was thinking deeply. The resemblance that had been hidden by years and different life experiences was becoming undeniable. James, she said finally, what do you want from this situation? What are your expectations? He was quiet for a long moment, clearly having wrestled with this question himself. I want the chance to know my son. I want to be part of his life if he'll let me. I know I can't make up for 25 years, but maybe I can be present for whatever comes next. And if he doesn't want a relationship with you, if learning the truth makes him angry at both of us, then I'll respect his decision, James said firmly. I won't force myself into his life or make demands based on biology alone. But Sarah, I think we owe him the chance to make that choice for himself. Sarah knew he was right. Marcus was an adult who deserved to have all the facts about his own life. Continuing to keep this secret would only make the eventual revelation more painful. How do you think we should tell him? She asked. Together, James said without hesitation. This affects all three of us, and we should face it as a family, even if it's a family that's just discovering itself. The word family sent a shiver through Sarah. After all these years of just her and Marcus, the idea of expanding that circle felt both terrifying and oddly hopeful. He's planning to leave for his first assignment next week, she said. Maybe we should tell him before then while we're all still in the same place. James nodded. I can arrange for us to have a private space on base if you think that would be appropriate. Somewhere neutral where we can all talk freely. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that agreeing to this plan would set everything in motion. Okay, let's do it. Let's tell him the truth. 3 days later, Marcus sat in Commander Richardson's private office, confusion evident on his face as he looked between his mother and his commanding officer. Sarah had asked him to meet them there, saying there was something important they needed to discuss about his future in the SEALs. Marcus, Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, and I want you to know that every decision I made was because I loved you and wanted to protect you. Marcus straightened in his chair, his military training kicking in as he prepared to receive serious information. What's going on, Mom? Sarah glanced at James, drawing strength from his encouraging nod. The story I told you about your father, about him dying in combat, isn't true. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so very sorry. The color drained from Marcus's face. What do you mean it isn't true? Your father didn't die, Sarah continued, her eyes filling with tears. I lost touch with him when you were born, and I thought he was gone forever. I created the story about his heroic death because I thought it would be easier than explaining that I couldn't find him. Marcus looked stunned, his world suddenly shifting beneath him. So my father is alive? Where is he? James cleared his throat, drawing Marcus's attention. Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Something in the commander's tone made Marcus focus intently on his face, and Sarah watched as her son began to notice details he had missed before. The similar eye color, the shape of the jaw, the way they both rubbed their temples when thinking hard. 26 years ago, I was a young Marine on leave in San Diego. I met your mother and we fell in love. But I was deployed before either of us knew she was pregnant. I spent months trying to reach her after my deployment, but she had moved and I couldn't find her. Marcus's eyes widened as the implications became clear. You're telling me that you're my father? Commander Richardson is my father? Yes, James said simply. I am. The silence that followed felt endless. Marcus looked back and forth between them, his expressions cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been anger. So for 25 years, I've been living a lie? He said finally, his voice tight with emotion. Not a lie, Sarah said quickly. A story I created to give you something to be proud of when I thought the truth would only cause pain. But the truth is that my father was alive all along, and I could have known him if you had just tried harder to find him. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow, but James intervened before she could respond. Marcus, that's not fair to your mother, he said firmly. The military's security protocols in 1999 made it nearly impossible for civilians to track down deployed personnel. Your mother was young, pregnant, and dealing with an impossible situation. She made the best decision she could with the information she had. Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the base where he had spent the last grueling months of training. This is insane. My commanding officer is my father. The man who put me through Hell Week is my father. I had no idea, James said quietly. When I saw you walk into training, I noticed some familiar features, but I never imagined you could be my son. It wasn't until I saw your mother's tattoo yesterday that the pieces started falling together. Marcus turned back to face them, his expression still shell-shocked. A tattoo? Sarah pushed up her sleeve to reveal the small rose tattoo that had started this entire revelation. I got this the summer I met your father. He drew the design for me. Recognition dawned in Marcus's eyes as he remembered James sketching during quiet moments throughout training, always drawing the same intricate patterns. You drew that? I did, James confirmed. I've been drawing variations of that design for 26 years, not really understanding why. I think part of me was trying to hold on to the memory of that summer. Marcus sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. So what happens now? Do I call you Dad? Do we pretend to be a happy family? How do we even begin to process this? We take it one day at a time, James said. Marcus, I know this is overwhelming, and I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I want you to know that if I had known about you, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life. And I want you to know, Sarah added, that even though the circumstances were difficult, having you was the greatest joy of my life. You are everything good and strong and brave. And that's not because of any story I told you about your father. That's because of who you are. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he looked up at James with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Tell me about Kosovo. Tell me about what happened after you thought you'd lost us." For the next 2 hours, James shared stories from his military career while Sarah filled in details about Marcus's childhood. Slowly, carefully, they began building bridges across the years of separation. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus's anger seemed to soften into something more like grief for the relationship they had all missed. But underneath that grief, Sarah could see the beginning of something else. Hope for what they might build together going forward. "I need time to process all of this," Marcus said finally. "But I want you both to know that I love you, Mom, and I'm grateful for everything you did for me. And Commander, James, I think I'd like the chance to get to know you as my father, not just my commanding officer." James's eyes filled with tears for the first time since the conversation began. "I would consider that the greatest honor of my life." Sarah watched her son and the man she had once loved beginning to tentatively explore their connection, and she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The road ahead would be complicated, filled with difficult conversations and adjustments as they all learned to navigate these new relationships. But for the first time in 25 years, Sarah felt like they were finally telling the truth about who they were to each other. Marcus would still deploy with his SEAL team, but now he would leave knowing that he had 2 parents who loved him and were proud of the man he had become. James would finally have the chance to be a father to the son he had never known existed, and Sarah could stop carrying the secret that had shaped so much of her adult life. As they prepared to leave the office, Marcus paused at the door. "You know, it's funny," he said, looking at James. "Throughout training, I kept thinking that you reminded me of someone, but I could never figure out who. I guess I was seeing my own future in you." James smiled, the kind of proud paternal smile he had never had the chance to share before. "No, son. I was seeing my own past in you, and it was beautiful."